Hi, my name is Jared Haight. I'm one of the developers behind the Faction C2 framework, and I wanted to do a video demonstrating how to install the HTTP transport for Faction. Uh, when we talk about transports in Faction, we are really talking about a separate server that kind of takes the place of the the redirector that you would set up for your C2. So for this demonstration, for this video, this is the setup that we have that we're going to be working with. So we have our HTTP transport. It's going to be on a separate server. It's communicating back to the Faction API, which is where, like, if you're using the web console to interact with Faction, that's what you're talking to. And transports exist so that agents can communicate to them instead of directly to the Faction API. And then together with the corresponding module inside the agent, the transport and the agent can work together to manipulate and obfuscate traffic, as well as, just send it over different medians, DNS, ICMP, whatever. In this case, we've released a just HTTP transport. It's a .NET based web server that has the ability to be customized with profiles so that you can kind of customize what that HTTP traffic looks like on the wire. By default, it looks like a weather check-in. So in this case, we're going to be setting up our HTTP transport server at wx.c2.lol. And our main faction API is going to be at faction.c2.lol. So the first thing we're going to want to do is to clone the transport HTTP repo. Instructions for setting up everything are included in the README for the repo, but it's a pretty straightforward process. So first thing we're going to do is just grab this clone command, and we're going to go to our WX server, and we're going to clone down the repo. Next thing we're going to want to do is actually configure the transport. So we need to tell it where the Faction API is, what URL it's going to be listening on, like what its domain name is, stuff like that. That's all defined in the config.json file. So we go in here, we can see, we have our transport URL, which is going to be wx.c2.lol, wx.c2.lol. We're listening on 443. Our faction URL is https faction c2.lol. And these last three items here, we're actually going to get from faction itself. So let's switch back and we're going to log into faction. And we're going to create a new transport. So on the transports tab, we go ahead and click the new transport button and give it a name. In this case, we're just going to give it the name of the domain that it's going to be listening on, wxc2.lol. And in return, we get a transport ID number, the API key name, and the secret that the transport is going to be using to authenticate to the Faction API. So we'll grab this. And we'll go back here. All right, so transport ID is 2. That 2. There we go. Our key name and our secret. Everything looks good here. Let's go ahead and save it. And now we're going to build the server. So if we look down here, here's where we can talk about generating your own SSL cert. But here's the build command. We're just going to be using the built-in. By default, the transport will create a self-signed cert that we're just going to leverage. So we'll run this build command. We need to be sudo to run it. Like most of Faction, we're distributing this as a Docker container just to make it easier to deploy. You can deploy this basically anywhere Docker can run, which is why we decided to go that route. So the process for Docker is, we first build the image, which, runs all the, commands and stuff to actually install and configure the application. And that's going to give us an image, I believe. And then when we run it, it becomes a container. I probably should have looked that up before doing this, but I think that's how this works. So image is built. Next thing we're going to want to do is just run this command right here, where we basically do docker run and then say we're listening on this port, which is going to be mapped to this port in the container. In our case, it's really simple. It's just 443 to 443. So we'll just type this out, docker run p443 colon 443 and transport HTTP. So it's registering with the API, it is successfully registered, and it is now listening. So if we go to https wx.c2.lol, self-signed cert, so we expect that. And by default, it just looks like the Microsoft Azure when you create a new functions app. But really, it's our secret transport server for Faction. So if we refresh this, we should see, so now it's registered with a type. So we know that the transport is successfully registered. We know what type it is. And now if we go to payloads, we can actually create a new Marauder agent. We'll go through some defaults here. And we have wxc2.lol available as a transport. So Faction knows that this is an HTTP transport. It knows that Marauder has a HTTP module available, so it lists that as one of the options when you build Marauder. So we'll go ahead and create that. All right, so our payload is built. Let's go ahead and download it. All right, so there's our Marauder payload. And let's expand this out a bit. So we can see that we registered. We can see that we are using the wx.c2.lol as our transport server. And if we switch over to Faction, we can see that this agent is using the wx.c2.lol transport server. So let's do load standard lib. And if we flip back here, there's our blob for standard lib. And it should be loaded, great. And we'll just issue an ls or a ps. Uh-oh, what happens when we add a backslash to something? Okay, cool. Could not find command ps, it didn't crash. All right, so there we go. We have a Marauder agent that is now connecting through our redirector, our HTTP transport server, and talking back to Faction instead of connecting directly to Faction. I'm going to do a video a little bit later about how to customize this HTTP profile. But if you want to get a head start in the meantime, we do talk about customization here. And the file you're going to be interested in is under profiles and then the http profile.cs. So this is the file you would be customizing to create your own transport, your own tricks and whatever. So yeah, thanks for watching. And if you have any further questions, please open an issue on GitHub or join us on the Bloodhound Slack. We have a Faction C2 channel there that a bunch of people sit in, and we're happy to answer questions. So thanks.